Why did one harmless chat in a quiet corner turn into the moment everything fell apart? What happens when a fiancé's silence becomes scarier than shouting, and every innocent laugh is replayed as evidence? Can a woman explain her way out when the proof was public and her story no longer controls the room? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I'm Elara, and if I could take back one evening, it would be the night I sat too long in that quiet cafe corner with Micah. People say silence tells you everything, but I didn't understand that until I saw Jonas's face across the room. He didn't shout, didn't accuse, didn't even flinch, just looked at me like something in him had finally broken. Everyone at the table laughed, assuming he was just shy or jealous. I laughed too, pretending it was all harmless. But his silence followed me home, into the kitchen, into the space between our mugs on the counter. For days, I told myself he was being dramatic, that a confident woman shouldn't have to apologize for talking to a friend. I even posted about it. Women can have friends. And watched the likes roll in like proof that I was right. But now, every time I replay that night, I remember the calm way he blinked before looking away. That quiet was worse than any fight. It was warning disguised as patience. I didn't realize that his stillness wasn't surrender. It was preparation. If I'm honest, I never meant for that night to turn into the beginning of the end. It was supposed to be a simple after-work thing. Our team had finally closed a campaign that took 6 exhausting weeks, and everyone wanted to celebrate. I told Jonas it was just a casual get-together, no big deal. He said he might stop by after finishing some work calls. I shrugged, pretending not to care, though part of me wanted him there, to see how much people respected me now. The cafe rooftop was already buzzing when I arrived. String lights glowed in loops across the railing, and someone had dragged a portable speaker to the corner, playing soft acoustic covers. I spotted Micah leaning against the ledge, holding 2 drinks like he'd been waiting. He grinned and offered one, said I'd earned it. I laughed and took it, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. We found a quiet table at the far end, away from the noise. I remember thinking how nice it was to have someone who listened without checking his phone mid-sentence. Micah talked about work, about how he admired how I handled pressure. He said Jonas was lucky. I rolled my eyes, half flattered, half annoyed. I told him Jonas didn't see how much I carried for us, how I was always the one smoothing things over. Micah nodded in that soft, understanding way that makes you want to keep talking. When the others got louder, I shifted closer so he could hear me better. It wasn't flirty, at least not in my head, just comfort. People kept passing behind us, laughing, clinking glasses, but for a while it felt like the whole rooftop had faded. He asked if Jonas ever came to these things, and I said he preferred quiet nights at home, like that was a flaw instead of stability. I said sometimes I felt more alone with him than when I was single. Micah said that was normal in long relationships. I liked that answer. It made me feel seen instead of guilty. Then Jonas walked in. I saw him before Micah did. He looked out of place, still in his work jacket, hair a little messy from the wind. His eyes swept the crowd until they found me. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He just stood by the entrance, one hand in his pocket, the other holding his phone like he wasn't sure if he should stay. I raised my glass, tried to make it look casual, but his gaze dropped to where Micah's hand rested near mine on the table. It wasn't even touching, but close enough to look bad from across the room. My stomach tightened. Micah followed my glance and turned. By the time he noticed Jonas, it was too late. Jonas's face didn't change, not even a twitch. He gave a small nod, turned, and left. Micah asked who that was. I said my fiancé, trying to sound amused. He muttered something like, "Ah," and pulled back his hand. The conversation died. I stayed a little longer, laughing too loudly at nothing, pretending I wasn't bothered. But inside, I kept replaying that look. It wasn't anger, it was emptiness. When I got home later, the apartment lights were dim. Jonas was sitting at the table, laptop open but not typing. He asked how the night went. I said fine, same as always. He nodded once. No follow-up questions, no suspicion. That calmness made my heart race. I told him he could have stayed if he wanted. He said he didn't want to intrude. I started rambling, filling the silence with excuses. I said Micah was just a friend, that everyone sat close because the café was crowded. He said, I didn't ask. That line hit me like a door closing. He got up, rinsed his mug in the sink, and set it down on the far side of the counter, away from mine. I watched the small clink as it touched the marble. He went to bed without saying goodnight. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering why I felt so defensive when he hadn't accused me of anything. I told myself he was being childish. He should trust me. I scrolled through photos from the night, me laughing, the city lights behind. In one, Micah's leaning close, both of us mid-smile. I posted it to my story with a caption, "Hard work, good company." It felt like a little act of rebellion. The next morning, Jonas was already gone. His mug sat clean beside the sink, his side of the bed perfectly smooth. On the fridge, a sticky note. Breakfast in the oven. No heart, no smiley face like usual. I told myself he was just busy. At work, Micah joked about Jonas catching us. I laughed too hard, said Jonas wasn't the jealous type. Inside, I wasn't so sure. My phone buzzed that afternoon, a text from Jonas. "Hope your day's going well." I replied quickly, "You too," adding a heart. No response. By evening, I couldn't take the quiet. I called him on the way home. He answered after 3 rings, voice steady. I asked if he was mad. He said no. I said I felt weird after last night. He said, "You always feel weird when you've done something you don't want to name." That line made me snap. I accused him of twisting things, of trying to guilt me. He said, "I'm not twisting anything. I saw what I saw." I told him people were exaggerating, that he had no idea how office culture worked. He said, "Maybe not, but I know what respect looks like." Then he hung up. That night he worked late in the guest room. I could hear the faint clicking of keys. When I peeked in, he closed his laptop and smiled politely. I asked if he wanted tea. He said he already had some. His tone was so gentle it made my skin crawl. I mumbled goodnight and left. A little after midnight, I got up for water and noticed something. His phone screen lit briefly on the counter, calendar open. There was an entry for the next morning titled, "Meeting, Personal." I frowned. Jonas never labeled anything personal. I took a sip of water and went back to bed, telling myself it was nothing. The next day, he was out before sunrise again. The air smelled faintly of coffee and printer toner. A new mug sat beside mine, identical but separate. The distance between them on the counter looked deliberate. That evening, I tried to fix the mood. I cooked his favorite pasta and waited. When he came home, he smiled politely, thanked me, but ate quietly. I told him I missed how we used to talk. He said we still could, whenever I was ready to tell the truth. I asked, "What truth?" He just looked at me, then back at his plate. After dinner, he packed a small bag. I asked where he was going. He said his parents' place for the weekend. I told him he was being dramatic. He said, "You call everything drama when you don't want to see how it looks." I wanted to argue, to make him stay, but I couldn't find the right angle. I just stood there as he zipped the bag and walked to the door. He paused, said, "I'll see you Monday." No kiss, no touch, just calm certainty. When the door closed, I laughed out loud, a sharp, nervous sound. I told myself he needed space, that by Monday he'd realize he'd overreacted. Still, something about that final look stayed with me. It wasn't anger at all. It was resolve. I scrolled through the photo again. Me and Micah, leaning close, lights glowing behind. My reflection in the screen looked different now. Too bright, too sure of itself. I typed a comment reply to a coworker, just celebrating hard work, and hit send, pretending the silence in the apartment wasn't swallowing everything else. When Jonas came back that Monday, everything felt rehearsed. He set his keys in the dish, hung his jacket neatly, and asked if I'd eaten. I said yes, though I hadn't. He nodded and went straight to the guest room. No argument, no scene. Just calm distance that made me itch to fill the silence with something. I followed him, leaning on the doorway, pretending to sound casual. I said I hoped his weekend helped him clear his head. He said it did. Then he asked if I'd thought about how I made things look that night. I told him I wasn't responsible for how people chose to interpret things. He said, interpretations usually start with something real. I rolled my eyes, said he was overanalyzing. He closed his laptop and said he was just observing. I hated that word. It sounded like something a scientist said before labeling a specimen. I tried laughing it off, saying we'd both been tired, that emotions got twisted. He didn't argue. He just stood, picked up his coffee mug, and rinsed it under the tap, like he was washing away the conversation itself. The next morning, he left earlier than usual. When I went to make coffee, I noticed both mugs clean and drying upside down. On the counter, his phone charger was missing. In its place sat a folded grocery list with a small sticky note. Bring forms. I frowned. We didn't have any forms. I took a picture of the note before tossing it in the bin. At work, I tried to distract myself. Micah dropped by my desk, grinning, holding 2 coffees. He said I looked tense. I said I was fine, just tired. He told me I shouldn't let my fiancé guilt me for having a life. I said Jonas wasn't like that he just didn't understand our work culture. Micah smirked and said, maybe Jonas didn't deserve front row seats to my charm anyway. I laughed, but it felt hollow. During lunch, my phone buzzed. Jonas again, just one line. Hope your meeting goes well. It felt pointed, like he was tracking me. I showed the text to Micah, rolling my eyes. He said, he's checking in, classic control move. The idea stuck in my head longer than I wanted it to. When I got home, Jonas was cooking. The smell of garlic and butter filled the air, and for a moment, it almost felt normal. I asked if he was making peace dinner. He said, no, just dinner. We ate in near silence. I mentioned Micah casually, testing his reaction. Nothing, just a soft hum as he cut his food. I said Micah told me not to let anyone dull my spark. Jonas set his fork down and said, I'm glad you have people to encourage you. I couldn't tell if he meant it or not. After dinner, he washed dishes while I scrolled through my phone. His calmness made me uneasy, so I started talking too fast. About work, my mother's calls, random nonsense. He listened politely. Then his phone vibrated on the counter. I saw the notification. File uploaded successfully. He picked it up before I could glance again. I asked what he was working on. He said, storage options. That night, I told my mother about it. She said he was probably just reorganizing his life because men get dramatic when they feel threatened. She laughed, told me to stand firm and not feed his insecurity. I repeated those words later to myself, like they were instructions. The next few days blurred into routine silence. Jonas kept to his schedule. Coffee at 7, gone by 7:30. His laptop always open when I got home, faint scent of toner in the air. I'd hear the printer hum sometimes at night. Once I checked, expecting documents, but it spat out only a blank page. I crumpled it and tossed it away, feeling oddly unsettled. One Friday morning, while he showered, I peeked into the guest room again. His desk looked immaculate, 2 folders labeled Utilities and Bank. A small USB drive lay beside them, marked with a date. I almost opened it, but heard the water stop and backed out quickly. He emerged in a towel, calm as always, and asked if I'd seen his socks. I said no. He smiled slightly. You never do. That weekend, we visited my family for dinner. My mother immediately noticed the tension. She poured Jonas a drink, told him men shouldn't hold grudges. He said, I don't hold them, I learn from them. Ava, my sister, gave me a look, half warning, half pity. I changed the subject to work stories, exaggerated how everyone adored me. Jonas stayed polite, complimenting the meal, thanking Marion for hosting. He was perfect, which somehow made me furious. After dinner, I followed him onto the porch. I asked if we were okay. He said, We're where your choices put us. I snapped that he was turning one misunderstanding into a tragedy. He said quietly, Misunderstandings don't come with applause and captions. My chest tightened. I accused him of spying on my posts. He said, You made them public. Inside, my mother tried to lighten the mood, calling Jonas too serious for his own good. I smiled and said she was right. Jonas looked at her, then at me, and said, Sometimes seriousness is just respect in a different language. The table went quiet. Driving home, I talked non-stop about random things just to fill the air. Jonas didn't interrupt. Halfway home, I noticed the reflection of his face in the window. Calm, expression unreadable. I told myself silence was better than shouting. I hated that part of me, almost wanted him to shout. Sunday morning, I woke to find him gone again. The apartment felt staged, his shoes aligned, wallet gone, bed smooth. On the dining table sat a neatly folded newspaper and another note. Meeting, personal. I sighed, muttering that he'd turned into a robot. That afternoon, Micah texted about another rooftop meetup. I hesitated, then typed, maybe. He replied instantly, You need it. You've been too quiet. The words felt like a dare. By evening, I was standing by my closet, trying on dresses that said confident but not guilty. I picked a black one. Simple, flattering. Jonas came home right as I was putting on lipstick. He asked if we had plans together. I said no, just co-workers again. He nodded slowly, eyes on the floor. Be careful what you call friendship, he said. I told him I didn't need advice from someone who sulked for days. He just replied, I'm not sulking. I'm documenting. I froze. What does that mean? He met my eyes, steady as glass. It means I've learned to stop arguing and start recording. He walked away before I could answer. For an hour I sat on the couch, the words echoing. Documenting, like I was a case file. I almost cancelled the meetup, but then anger overrode caution. I wasn't going to let him make me feel small in my own life. The rooftop was packed again. Micah waved from a corner table, 2 drinks waiting. I smiled, feeling the old rush of validation. We laughed about clients, co-workers, the usual nonsense. At one point, he brushed something off my shoulder, fingers lingering. I didn't move away fast enough. My phone buzzed, a text from Jonas. Be safe. I didn't reply. When I got home near midnight, Jonas was sitting at the table with his laptop. I asked if he was waiting up. He said, No, just reviewing. I asked what? He said, patterns. I laughed too sharply. You sound paranoid. He closed the laptop softly. Paranoia is fear without evidence. I'm past that part. He stood and walked to the guest room. I heard the lock click again. I sat alone in the dim kitchen, staring at my phone. The screen still glowed with his last text. Be safe. For some reason, those 2 words scared me more than any accusation could. The next week began with the kind of silence that feels planned. Jonas woke before me every morning, showered, left without sound. I'd find the same arrangement on the counter. 2 mugs, both spotless, one turned upside down. The apartment looked like a stage set after closing night. Even his shoes by the door lined up perfectly, like soldiers waiting for orders. At work, people were still sharing photos from the rooftop gathering. Someone had tagged me in a group shot. Micah's arm slung casually over my chair, both of us laughing. The background was a blur of lights, but Jonas's name appeared faintly in the comments. Someone had joked, "Your fiancé better step up his photo game." I deleted the tag, but not before 50 people had seen it. Micah came by my desk, holding 2 coffees again. He said I looked tense. I told him it was just the usual stress. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You know, if he's making you feel watched, that's not normal." I told him Jonas wasn't controlling, just sensitive. He said, "Sensitive or suspicious?" and smirked like he already knew the answer. By lunchtime, the conversation had shifted to weekend plans. One of the interns mentioned another after-hours meetup, this time at a rooftop bar downtown. I said maybe, pretending I hadn't already decided to go. It felt easier to play the part of the carefree woman everyone believed me to be. When I got home, Jonas was at the table again, typing. I told him about the new campaign at work. He said, "Good." I told him there might be a casual event Friday night. He said, "I'm sure you'll enjoy yourself." His tone was so even it made me feel like a child asking for permission. I asked if he wanted to come. He said, "No, I'll be occupied." That night, I heard the faint whir of the printer again. The smell of toner drifted through the hallway. I got up quietly and peeked from the door. Jonas stood by the machine, removing a fresh sheet. He held it up to the light, studied it for a moment, then slid it into a folder marked Archive B. I froze, not daring to breathe. When he turned, I slipped back into the bedroom and lay awake for hours, heart pounding. Friday came faster than I expected. I wore a white blouse, and the black skirt Jonas once said looked professional, but too short for the office. I told myself that meant it was perfect for tonight. He noticed when I walked out. "Big night?" he asked. I said it was just drinks. He looked at his watch. "You'll be home late?" I said maybe. He said nothing else, only nodded. The rooftop bar was crowded, strings of yellow bulbs cutting across the city skyline. I found Micah near the railing, already laughing with 2 co-workers. He waved me over, handed me a glass of wine before I could ask. "You made it," he said, like I'd done something brave. The music was loud enough that people leaned close to talk. It started harmless, the usual jokes and gossip. Someone took photos, someone else ordered shots. I kept checking my phone, no messages from Jonas. A small part of me wanted him to text, to prove he still cared. When he didn't, I told myself it was freedom. Micah pulled me toward a quieter corner when the group got too loud. The air was cooler there, and we could see the whole skyline. "You look good tonight," he said, soft enough that I almost missed it under the music. I laughed it off, saying everyone looked good under string lights. He stepped closer, saying, "Some people don't need them." I should have moved away. Instead, I asked how his latest project was going. Someone shouted my name across the rooftop. I turned just as a flash went off. One of our co-workers taking a picture. Micah still had his hand near my shoulder, his face close to mine. The photo captured that exact second. Everyone cheered, thinking it was funny. I laughed too, waving it off, pretending it didn't matter. Later, as the crowd thinned, I finally checked my phone. A single notification glowed from Jonas. "Home safe?" I didn't answer. I told myself he'd gone to bed already, that silence would make him think twice next time before sulking. When I got home near midnight, the apartment smelled faintly of coffee again. Jonas was sitting at the kitchen table, awake, his laptop closed this time. "Good night?" he asked. I said yes. He nodded. "Good." Then he added, "I saw the pictures." My throat tightened. "What pictures?" He tilted his head slightly. "The ones people tagged you in. You deleted them fast." My voice came out sharper than I meant. "You're checking my socials now." He said, "No, they were public." I started to defend myself, saying it was just friends goofing around. He didn't argue. He said, "I'm sure the caption 'Power couples don't need rings' was meant as a joke." I froze. I hadn't even noticed that comment. Someone must have added it later. He stood, poured himself water, and said quietly, "You might want to check what stays online before you try to erase it." Then he walked past me into the hall. The next day at work, everyone was buzzing about the photos. Someone had edited one into a meme, Micah and me mid-laugh, with the words, "Work hard, play harder." I tried to laugh along, but the knot in my stomach wouldn't loosen. Even Micah seemed uncomfortable now. He said, "Guess people love drama." By afternoon, my manager called me into her office. She said the post was unprofessional and had caused unnecessary attention. I apologized, blaming the team's enthusiasm. She said I should set better boundaries. The word stung. When I got home, Jonas was cooking again. He didn't look surprised when I told him about the meeting. "Consequences," he said simply. I told him not to act smug. He said he wasn't. "I'm just noting things." That night, while he showered, I checked his desk again. A new note lay beside the keyboard, "Follow-up Tuesday." Beneath it, a small USB labeled with today's date. I picked it up, feeling my pulse in my fingers. Before I could plug it in, the bathroom door opened. I dropped it back into place and stepped away. He walked out in his robe, saw me standing there. "Looking for something?" I said I was just tidying. He smiled slightly. "You don't tidy." Then he brushed past me and locked the drawer. On Sunday, I tried to fix things again. I made breakfast, played soft music, tried to start a normal conversation. He answered politely, every word chosen carefully. Finally, I snapped. "Can you stop acting like some silent judge? If you have something to say it." He looked at me evenly. "I already did. You just keep pretending not to hear it." I slammed my cup down. "You're impossible." He didn't flinch. "I'm patient," he said. "There's a difference." For the rest of the day, we existed like strangers sharing a waiting room. His calmness terrified me more than anger ever could. Late that night, when I walked into the kitchen for water, I saw his phone screen glow again. A calendar alert popped up. Paper drop, 10:15. I stared at it until the light faded. Then I went back to bed, whispering to myself that I was imagining things, that people don't plan endings this quietly. But deep down, I already knew that Jonas wasn't the kind of man who needed noise to finish something. Monday started grey, the kind of grey that seeps into everything. Jonas left without a word again, and the apartment felt like a hotel room no one had booked. I stood by the counter staring at the two mugs. Their placement had become its own message. His was always perfectly centered on the drying rack, mine still faintly ringed with coffee. I washed it slowly, as if that could wash away how much the silence was starting to hum. At work, people had mostly stopped talking about the photos, but I could still feel whispers when I walked past. Micah acted normal, too normal, cracking jokes about deadlines like nothing had happened. He leaned over my desk and said he'd gotten tickets to a networking mixer later that week. "Strictly professional," he added with a smirk. I told him I was done with office outings for a while. He laughed, said, "You always say that." By the time I got home, Jonas's laptop was open on the kitchen table. The screen showed a spreadsheet, columns of dates, short notes beside them. I glanced closer. Rooftop, dinner, late return, meeting, personal. My stomach twisted. He'd written everything down like data points. I closed the laptop too fast, leaving a faint fingerprint on the black screen. When he came in later, he noticed instantly. "You moved it," he said, voice calm but final. I started to protest, but he held up a hand. "Don't worry, it's backed up." I tried to laugh, said he was acting like an investigator. "No," he replied. "Investigators look for unknowns. I already know what I'm looking at." That night, I called my mother. She said I was letting him control the mood, that I needed to remind him who he fell in love with. Men get insecure when they realize you don't depend on them for validation, she said between sips of tea. I asked what that even meant. She said, "It means go out, smile, Make him remember you have options. Ava overheard the call and took the phone from her. Elara, she said, don't listen to Mum's movie advice. Jonas isn't angry. He's planning something. I rolled my eyes, told her she was being dramatic. She said she saw his car parked near a notary office last week. He's not joking around, she warned. I hung up before she could keep talking. The next day, Jonas texted me mid-morning. Dinner with my parents tonight. 7 sharp. No question mark, no emoji, just a statement. I almost didn't go, but curiosity won. When I arrived, he was already seated in his parents' dining room, calm as ever. Ria smiled politely, Colin offered wine, and I felt like a guest instead of family. The meal was painfully formal. Ria asked how work was. I gave vague answers. Colin asked Jonas if his project was wrapping up soon. He nodded. No one mentioned the tension directly, but it hung between every fork and knife. Finally, Ria said, "Marriage isn't a stage for competition." I laughed lightly, said I agreed. She looked straight at me and said, "Then stop treating it like one." Jonas didn't react. He just folded his napkin neatly, glanced at his watch, and asked if anyone wanted dessert. When his father shook his head, Jonas said softly, "I think we're finished here." On the drive home, I accused him of ambushing me. "You knew they'd take your side." He said, "I didn't say a word." That made it worse somehow. I said his silence was manipulative. He replied, "Your noise does the same thing." Back at the apartment, I threw my bag down, pacing. "Do you ever get tired of acting perfect?" I snapped. He took off his jacket, hung it precisely, and said, "Perfection isn't the goal. Clarity is." I told him he sounded rehearsed. He said, "I've had time to practice." He walked into the guest room and shut the door. I kicked off my shoes and checked his desk again. Desperate for proof, he wasn't really that composed. This time, the drawer wasn't locked. Inside were more folders. Household, utilities, bank. Underneath, a single USB marked by date. I picked it up, turning it over. My reflection stared back from the metal. I was about to plug it into my laptop when the front door clicked. I dropped it back and hurried to the couch. Jonas stepped in holding a grocery bag, calm as always. "You cook tonight?" he asked. My voice came out too quick. "Sure," he nodded. "Good. Bring forms." Then he walked to the kitchen. The phrase hit me like déjà vu, the sticky note from before. While chopping vegetables, I said casually, "You've been organizing a lot lately." He said, "Tidying helps." I asked what he was tidying exactly. "Loose ends," he replied, not looking up. Dinner passed in silence. I tried to start a conversation about vacation plans, but he said, "Let's not plan too far ahead." When I asked why, he said, "Some trips are solo." My knife stopped mid-cut. "Are you threatening to leave me?" I asked. "No," he said, "I'm promising to handle things properly." Later that night, I sat in bed scrolling through old photos of us, smiling at beaches, laughing at family dinners. I told myself he wouldn't really go through with anything. Jonas was too stable, too careful, the kind of man who always cooled down. But when I glanced at his side of the room, the wardrobe door was open, and a small overnight bag sat neatly packed inside. The following morning, I woke to the sound of the printer again. The smell of toner hung heavy. I walked to the kitchen quietly and saw him placing papers into a manila envelope. "What's that?" I asked. He didn't turn around. "Receipts," he said. "For what?" "For everything." I laughed, pretending I wasn't scared. "You sound paranoid." He sealed the envelope with slow precision. Maybe I'm just done with oral history." He left it on the counter beside his keys and went to work. I stood staring at it for minutes before finally opening it. Inside were printouts, screenshots of texts, timestamps, and even one of the rooftop photos with red markings circling faces. My stomach turned cold. I shoved it back and resealed the flap, my hand shaking. That evening, I called my mother again, panicked. She told me to calm down, that men bluff all the time. He's just trying to scare you, she said. He'll come around if you stop feeding it. Ava texted me separately. Don't underestimate him. He's too quiet. By Thursday, Jonas stopped coming home at regular hours. Sometimes he'd arrive near midnight, smelling faintly of paper and cold air. When I asked where he'd been, he said, finalizing. I wanted to demand answers, but his calmness made me afraid of hearing them. Friday morning, I noticed his laptop missing. In its place sat another note. Meeting family. My phone buzzed minutes later, an invite notification. Dinner at Hale Residence, 7 p.m. My chest tightened. I told myself it was just another awkward meal, another round of polite scolding. At 7 sharp, I arrived. Rhea greeted me with a strained smile. Colin poured me wine I didn't ask for. Jonas was already seated, expression unreadable. As soon as I sat down, he said, let's talk about next steps. What steps? I asked, clarifying where we both stand. His voice was calm, almost gentle. I told him we didn't need an audience for that. Colin said, actually, it's better this way. I started to speak, but Rhea cut in softly. Jonas deserves peace, Elara. He's tried patience. Now he's choosing order. Jonas pushed his plate away, stood and said, I'll handle it properly. Then he nodded to his parents, thanked them for dinner, and walked out. I sat frozen, the words echoing. Handle it properly. The calmest threat I'd ever heard. When I got home later, the apartment felt emptier than before. On the counter lay another folded note. Delivery confirmed. I didn't understand what it meant, but the dread that came with reading it made me realize something final had already begun. Saturday morning arrived heavy and slow. The blinds let in thin lines of light that cut across the sheets like warnings. Jonas hadn't come home the night before. I tried to convince myself he was with his parents again, or maybe out with colleagues, anything ordinary. But the quiet didn't feel ordinary anymore. It felt planned, rehearsed, like every silence had its place. I sat at the kitchen counter scrolling through my phone, half expecting a text that never came. The calendar on the fridge had a fresh entry in his handwriting. Appointment, 9:40 a.m. I almost laughed at how specific he was, but the sound caught in my throat. He used to write reminders like pick up milk or call Elara's mum. Now everything was stripped of warmth, just numbers and times. At 10, my mother called. You sound off, she said. I told her Jonas was acting distant again. She sighed. He's being stubborn. Don't give him that satisfaction. Go out, make him wonder what you're doing. I said I wasn't in the mood. She told me moods were for people who still cared. You need to show strength, honey, she added. That's how you keep control. Ava texted 10 minutes later. He's serious, Elara. I saw him outside a law office downtown. I didn't reply. I didn't want to believe her. That afternoon, I cleaned the apartment just to fill the hours. Jonas's desk drawer was locked now, but I still checked. The envelope on the counter was gone. In its place, a small folded paper. Key returned. I stared at it, wondering which key he meant. The front door, the storage locker, the one that used to hang on his keyring for our old apartment, still attached because he said it reminded him where we started. When he came home that evening, the air shifted. He looked composed, lighter even. I asked where he'd been. He said, taking care of loose ends. I demanded specifics. He replied, you'll see soon enough. Dinner passed in silence. The sound of our forks clinking against the plates felt too loud. I told him this distance was ridiculous, that adults talk through problems. He said, we've talked. You just don't listen when you're not winning. That night, I tried another approach. Apology without admitting guilt. I said I understood why he'd been upset, but reminded him that nothing actually happened. Intent matters too, he said. I rolled my eyes. So, now you read minds? He looked straight at me. No, just patterns. I barely slept. Every sound in the apartment felt amplified. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint tap of rain, the click of his pen in the guest room. Around 2, I crept out of bed and checked the living room. His jacket was gone. The window curtain moved slightly, the kind of draft that meant someone had opened the door not long ago. When I woke again at dawn, the bed beside me was cold. On the table lay another note: dinner with family, formal. The word formal underlined twice. My hands trembled. By 7 that evening, I was standing on Jonas's parents' porch again, holding a bottle of wine I didn't want to give. Ria opened the door with that same polite smile that felt more like a mask. Colin greeted me with a nod. Inside, the table was already set, candles lit though it wasn't dark yet. Jonas stood near the window, his posture too calm. We ate quietly for a few minutes. Then Ria said, "Elara, we think it's time to be honest with yourself." I asked what that meant. Jonas set his fork down. "You've spent months performing," he said. "Pretending the problem is how I react instead of what you've done." I laughed, but my voice cracked. "You're still mad about a photo? About talking to someone?" "You mocked me publicly," he said. "You let people decide what kind of man I am." "That's not fair," I shot back. "You chose to sulk instead of stand up for yourself." Colin spoke for the first time. "Our son doesn't shout, Elara. He fixes things properly." The word properly again. It sounded heavier each time he said it. I turned to Jonas. "What are you planning?" He leaned back slightly, almost relaxed. "You'll find out. It's already in motion." Ria's voice softened. "He's done everything the right way. That's more grace than most people give." I felt my face burn. "You're all treating me like a criminal. This is insane." Jonas stood then, buttoning his jacket. "No, it's order. I'll handle it properly." He said goodbye to his parents, nodded once at me, and walked out the front door into the dusk. I stood frozen, the sound of the door closing louder than anything else in the room. Ria sighed. "You should go home, dear. You'll need rest." I didn't ask what she meant. I just grabbed my purse and left. The drive back was a blur of headlights and panic. My phone buzzed twice. First a message from Ava. "Call me now." Then another from an unknown number. "Confirm receipt tomorrow, 11 RCM, lobby." I nearly dropped the phone. I reread it 3 times. No name, no company, just instructions. At home, the apartment looked cleaner than I'd left it. His side of the closet was empty, except for hangers. On the counter sat his watch, the one I gave him for his birthday, placed carefully beside a small envelope addressed to me. Inside was a folded note written in his precise handwriting. "You once said trust is boring. I finally agree. Handle yourself as you wish. I already have. No signature, no anger, just fact." I sat on the couch clutching the note until my fingers ached. My phone buzzed again, this time my mother. I answered, trying to steady my voice. She asked if I'd talked to Jonas. I said yes, sort of. She started ranting about men and pride, how he'd come around like they always do. I told her she didn't understand. "He's not emotional anymore," I said quietly. "He's prepared." She went silent for a moment, then forced a laugh. "Don't be dramatic. What can he possibly do? You're not married yet." But that was exactly what scared me. We weren't married yet, which meant everything, from the apartment lease to the joint account, was still adjustable. I hung up and wandered through the rooms like a stranger in my own home. In the bedroom drawer, I found the engagement ring box empty. He hadn't taken it, he'd left it open. A statement, not a theft. On his desk, the screensaver glowed faintly. I moved the mouse. The display opened to a single folder labeled Final. When I clicked it, the screen required a password. I typed his birthday, my name, even our anniversary. Nothing worked. I sat there in the glow of that locked screen, heart pounding. Somewhere beneath the hum of the computer, I thought I heard faint printer sounds again, phantom echoes. Around midnight, I packed a bag without knowing why. The apartment felt smaller, the air sharper. I texted Jonas, "We need to talk, please." The message stayed on delivered. By morning, there was still no reply. I checked the calendar one more time. A new entry had appeared overnight, synced from his shared account. Monday, lobby, 11 a.m. I stared at it until the letters blurred. Properly, lobby, 11. Whatever it was coming, and it wasn't a bluff. I arrived at the office lobby at exactly 11, clutching my phone like a shield. The air smelled of coffee and floor polish, the usual weekday chaos blurring around me. Micah waved from the reception desk, but before I could answer, a man in a dark blazer stepped forward, holding a white envelope. He said my name clearly, no emotion, and handed it over. I laughed at first, thinking it was some office notice. Then I saw Jonas's name printed in the corner. The seal tore too easily. Inside were 2 documents. The first, a formal notice dissolving our engagement and removing my access from our joint accounts. The second, an attached statement outlining defamation and breach of privacy, complete with screenshots of my posts, timestamps, and the viral rooftop clip. It cited intentional reputational harm. My throat closed. People were watching now. Micah stepped closer, whispering if I was okay. I wanted to say yes, but the words wouldn't come. The server nodded politely and left. Through the glass doors, Jonas stood by his car, suit immaculate, face unreadable. I rushed toward him, calling his name. He didn't move. He simply said, "It's all handled properly," then turned away. The doors hissed shut behind him, leaving me holding the papers that made his silence final.